Hi everybody, welcome to today's webinar. I hope you and your families and everyone around you is staying well and enjoying a little bit of the extra freedom we now seem to have been allowed, where we are allowed it. It's about 7 weeks since I did the first one of these webinars, and since then there have obviously been some really big changes for some of us, or at least comparatively big changes in terms of people we can see and places we can visit. But across all of the UK, for RDA, much has stayed the same, and sadly, necessarily so. Our priority remains the safety of all the participants and the volunteers, and ensuring that we support you to reopen groups in a steady and safe way. And while this for some may feel frustrating, it's the right way to go. On this basis, though, as you may know, we have a working party of volunteers led by Claire Milliken, my colleague here, who've done an amazing amount of work to prepare resources and guidance for groups who can get started, and this is really beginning to pay off. I know some of those working party members are on this webinar this afternoon. I'm incredibly grateful to all of you for the things that you've done and your continued efforts to keep up with an ever-changing and sometimes very complicated situation. So as of today, we have 15 groups signed up and operating. In each case, they're operating with a very, very small number of their most independent riders. So it's a good start, but we've got a long way to go. And I know from all the questions and queries that there are many more groups doing a lot of work to try and join them and get up and running. So that's really exciting. Even when normal activities aren't possible, some groups have been looking at ways to welcome participants back to the yard and spend some time with horses or their favourite pony. And from our recent research, which I'm going to talk a bit more about later on, we know how much horse is being missed and how welcome this kind of contact is for those people. For the majority, though, a return to normal activity, whatever that is going to be, is still a long way off. And I completely understand the multiple issues that will make it impossible for many groups to start up again with things the way they are now. But I make no apology for the effort we're putting in to support those groups who are able to get going and to make sure that we're ready for every group when the time is right for them. I also know how frustrating it might be for some of you to see other groups, particularly if they're nearby, being able to get going when yours can't. We're not shouting about all these successes yet, but I do hope that you'll feel able to show your support for those groups starting back in your own way. In practice, we all know that getting started is much harder than the shutdown was, and these groups, while they're fortunate to have the circumstances to be able to accept a few riders, it's worth remembering they've got to that point through a lot of hard work and determination on their half. I should also say that we're not putting any pressure on anyone to start unless it's absolutely safe and right for you to do so. This is not a competition, and I support the decision that any group takes to remain closed every much as a decision to make a start. So I want to talk a little bit about the research that we've done, and this week we have announced our second round of grants to groups, and these grants are designed to target groups either in immediate financial need or who need funds to help them get restarted, to either buy some new kit, do some new training, or make some adaptations. We've been able to make the application for these grants really straightforward. And that's mainly because of the recent research, surveys and conversations that have been carried out with groups. And this work's given us an unprecedented view of the financial resilience of the whole organisation and the vulnerability that some groups face now and may face in coming months. We've always known, and we've often heard it commented upon, that RDA does not fit a one-size-fits-all approach. And we've certainly never operated as if we do. On top of that, we're not an organisation whose members fit neatly into categories. Our groups are all different, they run in different ways, they work with different types of people and operate from different types of venues with different facilities, and I celebrate this difference. But all of these factors have an impact when it comes to financial resilience. And until now, we didn't have that information together in one place so that we can act upon it. Thanks to the efforts of the regional teams and your support as groups, we now have this organisation-wide view for the first time. We know, purely on the financial side, for example, that while 70% of groups are reporting the crisis to have had a significant financial impact on them, 3/4 of groups are also saying that they can survive for 12 months or longer in the current climate. So it probably won't be any surprise to know that most of those groups that can survive for the longer periods are those that don't own horses or premises, but we've been able to really demonstrate that. Importantly, we also know factors that increase financial vulnerability for those groups who are in more immediate danger. And this information we will be able to use to help us make decisions about how we support groups and the support we give to groups, to provide the right help at the right time. And with that in mind, it's important to also just recognise that the financial picture is not the only part of the story. Resilience in RDA, we know, comes down to far more factors than just money. So this period of closure has caused real and justifiable concern to volunteer numbers, horse fitness, training, and participant well-being and confidence. RDA communities need money, of course they do, but they simply don't exist at all without that amazing combination of horse, participant, and volunteer. This crisis has left its mark on each of those areas, eroding confidence, disrupting the network, and threatening to undermine the way we work and that thousands of our participants rely on. And that varies in different ways across groups. And we have a much better picture about how that affects each group now. Some positive information has also come out of the work. And one of the interesting things for me was the well over 100 groups that have successfully accessed either a government grant or some other significant income. Just yesterday, I learned that in England, RDA groups have received just about £250,000 from the Sport England grants programme alone. And while that support is really brilliant, I think it also demonstrates the importance that the government puts on our activity and on our survival. However, the survey also showed the number of vulnerable volunteers, which is really high. 3/4 of groups say they have volunteers who are in vulnerable categories, who may not be able to return to the group for some time, and clearly that puts more pressure on what we're trying to do. So in addition to the survey of groups about financial resilience, we also conducted our biggest survey ever of individuals across the organisation, looking at the impact of lockdown on our volunteers, our participants, and on their support networks. And we had three main reasons for carrying out that research. The first was to take the unique opportunity of all of our groups being closed to look at our impact. We always say that we make a difference, and so what happens if there's no RDA for a while? It seems a bit counterintuitive perhaps, but the lack of RDA in people's lives has thrown into sharp relief the vital part we play. Our second objective was to understand what groups and RDA can do to support members during closure and during the transition to reopening. To do this, we need to know the range of concerns amongst people and what people's priorities are, and if they have their own ideas about the support they need in the coming weeks and months. And finally, we want to make the world outside RDA understand the vital role of RDA in local communities. As a non-frontline health charity in this crisis, as we know, it's all too easy for us to get overlooked, as I discussed in the previous webinar. Our research gives us a platform to shout about what we do, to show the public why we need to be there for our communities in the future and why they should support us now in order to make sure that is the case. And we will do this and we will shout about this in this way. So we'll be distributing the report from this research after this presentation. And I really encourage you to take a look. It's a good read and it's got some very important points in it. But today I want to talk about some of the key themes that have come out of it. It's raised some interesting and important ideas that we should take note of and act upon, both now in this immediate situation, but also I think in the longer term. The first thing though I'd like to acknowledge is the serious and very real impact our closure is having on the lives of much of the RDA community, participants, their support workers, their networks and volunteers. With very few exceptions, this situation is causing a decline in physical and mental well-being for people, as well as in confidence. And when I'm aware that when these pieces of research get distilled into a report, it's all too easy to forget the individuals behind every statistic and finding. But I'd like to say a really big thank you to the thousands of people who contributed to the survey and shared your personal stories and challenges with us. You've been honest, open and frank, and I really hope we can repay that with the actions that we'll take as a result of the information we've gathered. So I'd like to start just briefly by looking at the operational side of things. Both volunteers and participants had questions and concerns about plans for restarting. These range from practical issues around social distancing and hygiene measures to more personal worries about safety and physical health. The concerns people have are absolutely justified, and as I mentioned at the beginning of this talk, there's a huge amount of planning being done by our working party to provide as much up-to-date guidance as possible on all of this. But we absolutely rely on groups to engage with their communities about this. We don't have the communication channels to reach all of the volunteers and participants in our community and to reassure them that this work is being done. Similarly, we don't have the information to tell people what planning is going on locally at your group. So I urge you, even if your group plans to remain shut, possibly for several more months, please keep your network informed and involve them and tell them about your plans. Let them know what's going on nationally as well. And we know from this research that there are individuals who have concerns about their group ever reopening again. People who have heard that we're in a crisis and they're worried about whether they'll ever come back to RDA. Perhaps that person's in your group, and if they are, they need to hear from you. So, as I mentioned, we know that the prolonged closure is having significant impact on physical and mental well-being for much of our community. We know there are riders and drivers who are worrying that they will have gone backwards in their ability, that they won't be capable of doing the things they could before, either because they've forgotten the skills or because their physical condition has deteriorated through a prolonged period away from exercise. Similarly, we know there are volunteers who also feel that physical strength and overall fitness will not be as it was. Perhaps unsurprisingly, health concerns are also a significant factor in people's attitudes to returning to RDA from a safety point of view. Will I be safe? Am I a risk from others? And what is my group doing to mitigate against the danger? Alongside this, we're also seeing how being unable to access RDA is affecting our members' mental well-being. There's the social side of not having regular contact with RDA friends and missing the emotional lift that many people get from time spent with horses. In addition, there are anxieties specific to the situation, things like actually getting used to leaving the house again and worrying about the health of others and the well-being of those horses. Despite this, however, and pleasingly, I've also seen an absolute determination to get back to RDA activity. The concerns shared by our community are not a reluctance to get back. If anything, I think they're bound up in the frustrations of not being able to get back soon enough, and a frustration that I share, and I'm sure probably we all share. Everyone has their own individual concerns and challenges, but one issue experienced by volunteers and participants alike is the erosion of confidence. Confidence is one of those sort of easy to say things that actually has a huge impact on our success as an organisation. We rely on it, we foster it, we use it, and I think we like to think we value it. And now more than ever, we need to demonstrate how much we value it as we help to rebuild confidence levels throughout our communities. We will all have a part to play here. First of all, thinking about ourselves, regardless of our role in RDA, as individuals going through this past few months, I think we've all had to adjust our worldview. We've all probably taken a knock to our confidence. The world as it was isn't the same anymore, and we're not quite sure how we fit into the new normal, and indeed what the new normal is going to be. This is a situation that requires new skills, new reserves of resilience, and we're all questioning our ability to cope with that. In the context of RDA and reopening, this prevailing sense of uncertainty has the potential to be a significant limiting factor for us as an organisation, both now and in the near future. And the responsibility, I think, lies with all of us to tackle this. As RDA UK, it's been our objective to equip groups and volunteers with the skills and the knowledge to carry out activities with confidence. As we learn to adapt the way we do things to meet the current restrictions, there will be new things to learn, new practices for us to adopt and to share. And we'll continue to develop and deliver the training programs that volunteers need, both as closure continues for many groups and to support those who are looking to restart. Within groups, there's also a need to address confidence, and the research has shown us the importance of finding out the things that people are worried about so we can find ways to reassure and take action where necessary. This might be by providing training or refresher courses for people to do at home, or it might just be a conversation to let someone know that they're still a valued part of the team. I want to talk a bit about communication now, and unsurprisingly, the biggest issue to come out of this research is the need for communication across the entire RDA network. Our survey shows the overwhelming benefit to individuals of being contacted by their group during lockdown. It keeps people connected, it makes them feel part of the team, it reduces anxiety about the future of the group and the well-being of people and horses. It's a source of hope and sometimes entertainment and a valuable social connection. We know that around half of our groups are keeping in touch with their members during this period, and that's really important and brilliant to see. And the creativity you're showing in this regard is inspiring. We've all heard about quizzes, and we've probably all taken part in online quizzes, which 3 or 4 months ago are not something we thought about. But there've been competitions, there've been some fantastic songs, and there's even been a chance to have Zoom calls with horses. These might seem like a bit of fun, but I know the significant difference this is making to many people. So thank you to everyone who's keeping their communities together by taking these kind of actions during this time. Whatever relationship you have with your group, if you're a volunteer, a coach, a group organizer, a participant, or a supporter, please try and encourage your group to keep connected and keep communicating. I can't stress the importance. And please don't think that I don't know how hard it is for some groups to reach out to everybody. Not everyone has a direct link to all of their participants, for example. There might be schools and care providers involved in your networks, and that can feel sometimes like a barrier. But please try and stay in touch with those schools. I know that they really appreciate that hearing from RDA. I'd also like to reiterate here the need to keep participants and volunteers updated with news from the wider organisation, as well as your group plans, even if you don't have any current plans to reopen. We've all experienced the feeling of isolation and disconnection that lockdown has created, and it's reassuring for people to know that there's something happening. One thing that research really has highlighted to me is that RDA doesn't stop just because our activities stop. We're not something that people just switch off and switch on again when it's time to go back. This is a huge strength, and the strength is in the living, breathing communities that you have all helped create and nurture. And these exist for our members, whether there's a place to go to every week or not. Of course, it's not the same when we're closed. A Zoom chat with a horse is never going to be the same as actually riding. But it's a reminder we're still there, and it's a reminder that we care, and it's a reminder that we want to stay in touch. And on that note, there's an element of this project that was not in our original objectives, but has revealed a much more significant and fundamental aspect of our network. As I said before, this is the biggest survey we've ever carried out to the network. About 3,500 people took part. About 2,500 of those were volunteers. The remaining 1,000 made up of parents, teachers and carers, and just 313 participants. This still represents the biggest number of our service users whose views we've been able to gather together, but it's absolutely not enough. I should stress I'm not discounting the value of volunteer responses in other people, not in any way. And the insight we've been able to gather to help support volunteers through this time is really invaluable. However, it does worry me that we've been leaders in disability sport and therapeutic activity for over 50 years now, and I don't think we can say that we effectively represent the views and needs of all of our service users with that level of engagement. So it's fair to say this is a nettle we really haven't grasped before. As a membership organisation whose members are technically speaking our groups and not the people we work with, there's always been a limited and considerable constraint on direct contact we have with volunteers. Inroads have been made in the past, but we have not gone far enough. And I'm aware this isn't a universally held view. I know there are groups who chose not to pass our survey on to their members and who more generally feel that the relationship with participants, that their participants have with RDA begins and ends with the group. I'm afraid I disagree with this, and I think we're missing a trick here. But it possibly doesn't matter which one of us is right. And what matters is that people have the opportunity to decide for themselves. Where we did get response from participants and their support networks, their input has really highlighted a clear and pressing need to deal with our culture of inclusion, or lack of it. We have the positive feedback from those who've been made to feel part of the bigger picture, the concerns of those who've heard nothing and don't know whether their group still exists, for example. But then there's the gap. There's the 25,000 other participants whose views and concerns, whose ideas or input we haven't been able to capture. This has been backed up, interestingly, this morning by a report produced by the Activity Alliance, which used to be the English Federation for Disability Sport, chaired by one Sam Ord, previously of this parish, and which absolutely stresses the importance of this point. As they say, and I quote, "Please remind people to talk to their participants, to jointly find the right solution and to understand their needs and what they require." So we need to do more in that regard, and we will do. But generally, what are we planning to do with all the information we've got from the research? So I've spoken a little bit about the new grants process, which is underway. As you know, the insight we now have from groups about financial resilience, their considerations for participant and volunteer well-being, and the fitness of horses is directly influencing the decisions we're making. We will be using that information for our new grants round, but we're also using it to inform our guidance and resources for groups restarting, as well as our training and support for coaches and volunteers. We're increasing the resources available for participants to take part in at home and help groups find new ways, helping groups find their own ways of providing this support. We are finding ways to adapt services that we can provide based on the ideas coming from you, the groups, so that hopefully more groups can offer some kind of hands-on experience for riders and drivers. And our working party is picking up on this right now and compiling good examples and support to deliver these. For example, the wonderful idea that some groups have already instituted of quiet corners where where groups can't actually get riding going, but people can come and spend a bit of time with a horse in a safe and socially distanced way. The report from the impact study to members contains several recommendations, which you can see if you read the report, both for RDA UK and for groups. And these range from some of the bigger issues I've already discussed around communication and inclusion to specific ideas for training and confidence building that we can implement now. We'll be using this insight to support our publicity and fundraising as well in coming months, and I hope you'll be able to do so too. Next week, we'll be sending out a press release which we will circulate to groups supporting the research, as well as detailing our new fundraising campaign, which replaces our first emergency appeal fund. As we move through the crisis, this appeal will reflect our changing needs as we support those groups that remain vulnerable, the ones trying to make the most out of continued closure, and of course, those planning to restart and get open again. To support the increasing numbers of groups that are working or trying to get back to work, we're also from the start of July starting to bring back some of the team here off furlough in a very, very limited way. This will increase the support we give you, and I'm very confident enable us to be agile in our response to your changing situations so that we can continue to support you. So I understand there are a lot of challenges revealed by the research that we've been carrying out, both personal and organisational, and these will be taken seriously, addressed and acknowledged in the actions we take. But there's a lot of positive insight to take away from it too. RDA may be shut to all but a very few people right now, but we're still important to our members, and we need to remember that. And the thing that will keep us all together in the coming months is that strong unified aim to get RDA activity back as soon as is safely possible. And where we can't, we know the power of the community to bring hope, reassurance and friendship to those who need it. Just yesterday, I spoke to the mother of a woman who rides here at Lowlands. Like many people in her situation, the stress of caring for her daughter through the last 3 months of lockdown, along with everything else that's happening, was clear. She rang to implore me to try and find a way to get her daughter riding again as soon as possible. I'm sure many of you will have had similarly difficult conversations explaining why we'd love to, but we can't do so, at least not yet. But I was also struck by her affection and her respect for RDA and the importance she seemed to attach simply to being able to have that conversation. We may not be able to help her daughter yet, but we can make sure she's heard, and we can do what we can to support. And all of that really further strengthens my resolve to do all we can to get back up and running. I'm sure it does yours as well. So thank you to everyone who took part in our research, and thank you for everything that you are all doing to keep the family together. This community is a really special one, and we know that what we do is really special. And I think everything that we can do to engage people and keep them engaged is probably the most important activity that we need to keep going. So thank you for taking the time to listen to me today. I hope you have a great weekend, and I hope you all stay dry. Okay, bye.